Finnova is a foundation that fosters innovation, sustainability, and the circular economy through EU-funded projects and public-private cooperation. So thank you very much for allowing us to be here. And welcome, everyone, to the last session before the lunch break. And this session on how to build a competitive, resilient, and sustainable European waterborne sector. Well, the European waterborne sector is key and strategic for Europe. At the same time, it's facing several challenges, as we have already been hearing about the EU blue economy and all the sectors involved. There are ambitious sustainability and decarbonization objectives, increasing global competition, and a strong focus on turning policy ambition into practical delivery. The sector operates in a highly competitive global market and in an increasingly complex geopolitical environment that is changing and becoming uncertain. Today's discussion is about to build a competitive and sustainable European waterborne sector, delivering on the EU's climate action plan and strengthening Europe's industrial sovereignty. For speaking and discussing about this topic, we will have our panelists, which I will introduce right away. And then there will be opportunities of having questions from the audience. So I would like to welcome Mr. Let's see if I pronounce it properly, Hebrad, who is the Secretary General of the Waterborne Technology Platform. Thank you very much. Well, as already you know, the Waterborne Technological Platform is a stakeholder platform that brings together industry, research, and public actors in the waterborne sector. Please welcome to the stage as well to the Head of Innovation of the Port of Barcelona, Carles Rué. Welcome. Thank you very much. He works on innovation-driven initiatives linked to technology, digitalization, and port transformation. And now I would like to excuse Mr. Niels Wamman Jessen, who is the Executive Vice President of International Regions of Cruise Lines International Association, who is having a terrible flu, and he excused himself as he cannot make it today because he's not well, and he didn't want to infect the rest of the room. And shortly, we will be joined by the member of the European Parliament, Mr. Paulo dos Nascimento Cabral, who is a member of the Fisheries Committee and also Vice President of the Intergroup of the European Parliament on sea, rivers, islands, and coastal areas. So he will be joining us a bit later because he's in a committee, in the Fisheries Committee. If I'm not mistaken, the committee is running late. The commissioner is there. He was here as well. And once he finishes, he has a vote and he has to speak there, so he cannot miss it. He will be joining the panel. So now I would like to join the conversation with Mr. Rua, Carles Rua, and Jaap Hebrad. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your first. Hello. Thank you very much for joining today. I would like to start with a general question to both of you, which is what do you see as the main challenge that is currently having the European waterborne sector? Who would like to start?
Only one?
Pardon?
Only one?
Well, I guess, and I said there are many, but you can say a few, but for you, which will be the most, if?
I take it from two angles. One is, and that sounds maybe strange, but communication. We hear a lot that our sector is conservative. We have a partnership with the European Commission investing where the Commission is investing 530 million via Horizon Europe. The sector is investing 3.3 billion at the same moment in time. So are we conservative or introvert? I think that's one of the first things we need to tackle. But also if we look, for example, at decarbonizing the sector, is the sector one, or do we consist out of many segments which might need dedicated solutions? decarbonizing a ferry or decarbonizing an international intercontinental container ship, for example, are two completely different avenues. Now, if we look at the other part, and it has been tackled already in the previous panel, international competition. International competition, in terms of the production side, so shipyards and equipment manufacturers, but also in the ship owner side, and we see more and more increased international competition. So how do we remain as Europe the waterborne leader we currently are, because the continent still is a leader in a couple of segments. The second part is increased labor shortage, both for the production side, but also for the seafaring side, and maybe also in the port side. How do we keep our ship sailing, our equipment and ships being produced in a time where we have lesser and lesser people on the labor market? The third one, of course, the transition to a zero-emission sector with very ambitious targets for 2040 and 2050. How do we collectively all get there? And the fourth angle, which is maybe also connected to the first three, the model shift. How do we do all of this in such a way that we do not get a reverse model shift in some of the shipping lanes? So I would say that are the main challenges which I would currently identify for the sector.
Thank you very much. First, before continuing, I would like to welcome Mr. Paolo de Nascimento Cabral, member of the European Parliament, that I already introduced you, but I would like to do it again, a member of the Fisheries Committee, and also Vice Chair of the Intergroup of the European Parliament on Sea, River, Islands, and Coastal Areas. Welcome to our panel. I was launching a first question that Mr. Hebrard has already answered on what is the main challenge that we are facing, or the waterborne sector is facing.
Okay, so good morning to all. Thank you, Pilar, for a double introduction of me. Sorry for being late. We had just had a meeting with Commissioner Cadiz. I know that he was here also this morning. And a word to thank the invitation, of course, and to compliment my fellow panelists and all of you. Well, the main challenges, we just heard some of them. But I believe that when we are facing right now such a geopolitical tension, such instability, and globally speaking, when we are talking about the supply chains, critical raw materials, I believe that the main challenge for now for the European Union is to achieve its strategic autonomy. And the strategic autonomy is to guarantee that all supply chain should be based, of course, in the EU, not isolated, not close within themselves itself, but also open to the world with partnerships for sure. But we cannot lose what we lost in several decades before. We lost the control of the industry. We lost the control of producing goods, in this case, very important actives like the ships that we totally depend, just to give you some numbers that you already know for sure, 40% of all internal trade comes from the sea, 80% of all external trade comes from the sea. So the ships are quite important in all of this process. So this is why it's so important to guarantee again that we have the full control of the supply chains in order to have build the capacity of building the ships. And we know that it's a common sense, but I had some meetings, and the idea is that we lost to Asia, to Asiatic countries, mainly to China, for instance, the capacity of production of low prices construction of buildings. But we are quite good on complex ships, on added value, on creating some of the most advanced ships in the world. So I think that we should start from that point and also guarantee that we have the knowledge or also the know-how and also the skills in order to continue this process. One of the things that it doesn't make any sense for me, for instance, it was when I had some meetings, one meeting, that I was told that, for instance, some military ships came from China. Nowadays, when we are facing such a different or difficult situation, we cannot have this kind of dependencies. And we knew what happened, for instance, the electric buses on one member state that was controlled completely by China. They had the total control of what was happening on this member state, on the traffic of this member state, of the routes of the buses, etc. So this poses, I will say, several and also severe questions of our strategic autonomy. Finally, in order to have some debate, I would like also to tell you that in so many cases, we buy the ships, the European Union, buy the ships, the European countries, then we use them, we buy it based on price and not taking into account all the life cycle of the ship or the cost of the whole life cycle of the ships, and then we sell it for dismantle in Asia, for instance. So again, we had the cost of the purchase, we bought the ships, but we don't keep the raw material, the steel or the iron, etc. So it doesn't make any sense because we will buy again another ship from the material that was built, the ship that we sent to Asia to dismantle. So this is why it's so important to control all the supply chain and to guarantee that here at the European Union, we have to address all of these issues. And finally, just to conclude, one major challenge right now is security. The security of our ports, and we need to control better our ports, the security of our seas, and we cannot forget that we need capacity on the seas in order to monitor the seas, guarantee, for instance, the safety of the submarine cables, guarantee that the Russian shadow fleet doesn't do what they are doing right now, guarantee that, for instance, the Chinese are not using all the biological resources available, and when we go there, we don't have nothing to explore, and guarantee that we have a strong position worldwide speaking. This is why it's so important, this sector for us. The shipyard sector is so important that we need to regain again on this reindustrialization process that we are now having in Europe, that we need to address it seriously with adequate funding and at the same time not forgetting the possibility of dual use, military and also being capable to transform for civil use or vice versa. So all of that is going to pose serious challenges for the sector for the near future with a lot of funding, and the competitiveness fund is quite important also for that. I'm rapporteur from EPP on the Regi committee, and we have to take all of that into account when we talk about the competitiveness of the European Union.
Thank you very much. We hear already from two parts of the stakeholders. Now I would like to hear from you, Mr. Carles Roy, from Ports.
Thank you, Pilar. From the perspective of ports, I think that probably we have two of the most relevant problems I think that we have, and I agree completely what you have said, but one of them is I'm not sure if we have clear priorities in the development of all the integrated policies in Europe. And I put an example. Now in this room, we have been talking about three main elements: sustainability, resiliency, and independence of the European independence from other countries and so on. But those objectives are antagonic between them. I mean, if you want to be more sustainable, then probably you will be less resilient. And I will put a clear example. A few months ago, you know that in Spain there was a blackout. The terminals that worked with electric machinery, they were stopped. The terminals that worked with diesel machinery continue working. So if you want resilience, you have to move to diesel. If you want sustainability, you have to go to electric or alternative fuels. But both are difficult to reach. So what do you prefer? Independence, sustainability, or resilience? Because the three at the same time will be very difficult. This is the first problem we have. The second one is that sometimes I think that we are not able to identify the real dimension of the problem. I'm talking about shipping sustainability. In the world, there are 100,000 commercial vessels. I think more or less, no, 100 and something more. Sometimes you read in the news, Maersk or MSC or CMA has an order book of new 6 vessels methanol ready, or 6 ammonia ready vessels, or 10, or 15 maximum. That's harmful compared with the 100,000 sailing vessels. Another thing is that a vessel has in Spain, the depreciation period of a vessel is 20 years. That means that the order books that are launched today will be sailing in Europe during at least the next 20 years. So if nowadays the order books are mainly with traditional fuel, that means that in 20 years, the vessels sailing in Europe will be with traditional fuels. When you're talking about changing the business and so on, we're talking about a small piece of the problem, but not touching that the average vessel in this world is a bulk carrier made in China with a Greek ship owner managed by a European company that today is here in Spain or in Rotterdam, but tomorrow will be in Singapore, and the day after that will be in Los Angeles. And if you are not thinking in this global perspective, you are losing part of the business or part of the results. And this is probably the main problem we have in this sector. We are talking about assets, but they are not fixed. A vessel can move. If they don't like what's happening in Europe, they will move to another place. It's happened with ETS regulation, no? That some movements has been moved with non-European ports. And if you develop new regulations or new activities related to emissions, vessels, and so on, the ship owner can move the vessel to another place without problem. So this is
So I don't know whether you, Mr. Gerard, would like to enter into the
contribute.
debate.
Yeah, from multiple
react.
perspectives. So if we speak about communication, most people know us from the container ships. But if you look at the number just given, 105,000 vessels classified by the IMO, 5,000 are container ships. So 100,000 IMO classified vessels are non-containerized, mostly small and medium-sized enterprises, family-owned ships, 1 or 2 vessels. So that's one part of the equation, as you just said. The second part, indeed, we need strategic autonomy in Europe, but the waterborne ecosystem is like a domino play. We can put a lot of resources in the shipyards. I don't say I don't agree. But the shipyards need the ship owner to buy the vessel, because only when the ship owner orders, the shipyard starts to produce. It's not like in the car industry. We also still have in Europe quite a strong base in equipment. Equipment which is European manufactured or European licensed and manufactured somewhere else. Of course, they need a big European market, but will they be able to survive without the international market? Yeah, exactly. And where we then end up in the end is that we also don't have a clear picture at the moment what is the capability and capacity in Europe to build. Because if we really want to go back in terms of strategic autonomy, and I don't say I don't agree, to building the ships that transport our LNG from the States to here, for example, do we have the dock capacity in Europe? 400, 500 meters long. We have 1 or 2 docks, I think, in Europe left at the moment. So that really requires years of investment before we are able to get there. So it's a very complicated puzzle, and I think we can get to the answers. But all of the actors, including the ports, because if we look at sustainable alternative fuels, I'm a ship owner today. I need to be zero emission by 2050. I want to order a ship today. Order books are full, so my ship is being delivered in 2030, something like this. Average lifetime of 20 years, in some segments less, in some segments more. So I need to know today which fuel am I going to use to order a vessel. But then I also need to know that the fuel is available in the port. Now, and there we have another equation. We have liner shipping, sailing between fixed ports. But 85% of the cargo is coming by bulk tram shipping, which doesn't know which port they are going to call after loading or unloading cargo. And all of that we need to put in the equation together to say, okay, what are then the roadmaps to get there, remain competitive, be fully strategic autonomy. So it is a lot of parts of the puzzle that we need to put together.
So from your very interesting answers, that takes me to some doubts I would like to understand. So we cannot be competitive, sustainable, and resilient. It's not possible, that equation.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. I mean, if you are not touching all the pieces like he says, it will be impossible. I mean, some things are against the other one. If you are touching the resilience, you are becoming more resilient. The more resilient thing is to use the traditional ways of doing things, because that works everywhere. I mean, a heavy fuel vessel can be bunkered everywhere in the world. So for me, for a ship owner, the one who has to construct the vessel, the most resilient for his business solution is a traditional fuel-powered vessel. It will work everywhere in the world. Any other option? I need to think, I need to change, I need to see where there are the fuel providers, if there will be the fuel. Also think that my business is the vessel. So probably in 10 years, I will like to sell it to another one that will have to buy it. And if he wants to buy it for other businesses in some other part of the world. So my methanol-powered vessel will work in another region of the world because I want to sell it in 10 or in 12 years. I don't know how will be the rest of the world. So the main problem here is that the dimension is very complex. You have to analyze a lot of things at the same time. And in order to take a decision or to promote a policy, you have to take into account all the elements that are surrounding this industry, that it's very, very complex. And sometimes it seems no. In 2030, all the vessels, container ships, ferries, and has to be connected to the grid. Okay, first question. Does the European grid enough power supply for all the vessels to be connected in 2030? Imagine that all the ports are able to do the good job and all are prepared. They will not be. Yeah. They will not be prepared. But imagine that we are prepared. The 1st of January of 2030, there will be a blackout in all Europe.
So,
this is the reality.
Yes.
This is the reality.
Mr. Nascimento Cabral, from the policy point of view,
exactly.
What can you do? What can we do? What can we expect?
Well, I have to say first, in my defense, that I don't agree with several of the Commission proposals. I have to say that. But I'm not so negative or a pessimist, I would say, as we just heard. And I believe that these pieces of legislation, these proposals, puts the European Union on the leadership of global ambition to deal, for instance, the increasing emissions for the maritime transport sector, that is roughly 2% each year. And we are doing a lot of efforts in all other sectors. So it's so important to, of course, even in this specific case of maritime transportation, we take into account the best practices to reduce the emissions. I wanted to say that I don't see it as impossible. I see it as a challenge. I see it as we didn't have such an amount of funding as we have right now to deal with this challenge. And I believe that the sector has to do an effort to increase the best practices possible. And if it's not possible, we will at least follow the path to reach some level of ambition. Secondly, I understood what you said. Your business is the vessel, but our business, globally speaking, in the European Union, the presence of the European Union in the world, is for sure to guarantee as we signed a few years ago, that our planet is not warming up. We have very environmental challenges and I would say proposals that are not aligned with the competitiveness that we need right now, because in several cases it's us who creates problems to our industry, to our producers, and then we are complaining about competitiveness. I agree with that. But at the same time, we have and we just approved the Ocean Pact, and now we are having the Ocean Act. We have the responsibility of using all our tools in order to get other members, other third countries to align with our goals. And when you are saying that we'll have a shutdown, it's quite complicated. I understand that. But this is why we have parallel directives and parallel activities in order to guarantee that our ports are completely prepared. And I agree with you, it's going to be a huge challenge. I don't see it in 2030, everything prepared. But I see a lot of efforts in several European ports to guarantee that you'll have sustainable alternative fuels. For instance, they'll have the possibility to even the ships to not produce any emissions when they are docked, when they are in the ports. All of that is a huge strategy and a big strategy in order to achieve this, I will not call it contradictory objectives that, as you just mentioned, but I believe the complementary objectives like sustainability, competitiveness, etc. So I don't see it in competition. I see it as a complementary and also as a complement and also as a challenge for all of us here seated and outside. At the same time, I would like also to say that I didn't refer strategic independence. I refer strategic autonomy. I don't want completely independence. I refer that we cannot be closed within ourselves. This is why I'm not saying that the sector only could apply to the European Union or European Union ports. I'm saying that, of course, we will need to guarantee that we have partnerships. These partnerships has to know that for transports or for reaching the European Union's ports, they will have to comply with some rules. As we also have to comply with some rules when you go to these ports or these countries. This is why it's so important for us to lead. And I believe that right now we are facing a huge crossroad. For one side, we have the climate or environmental ambitions for sure, but the other side, we need to increase competitiveness of our sectors, of our industry, of our economy. And I would say that a lot of times what we defend for now, it's again creating problems to our competitiveness. But nonetheless, I will say that I don't see it antagonic, I will see it complementary. Finally, I would like also to highlight the question of the solutions that we have right now. And there is Horizon Europe. That's a very important fund. We'll have the competitiveness fund for the next MFF. We have 1 billion for the blue economy. We have a lot of tools that we can apply in order to achieve the best results possible. I was in Nice and I saw one, it was for me quite new, but very interesting, but I understood that it's not so new. When you have this, I don't know the name in a foil, and you have a foil in the cargoes that you can use the wind energy in order to complement the fuel energy. So it reduces the emissions. I think that we should also support more initiatives like that or others that could help us. Of course, the sector needs stability and predictability. I remember a few years ago that the solution for all of this was natural gas. The vessels has to be moved by natural gas. And then all the tankers were adapted for natural gas, and then they stopped this idea. We need to guarantee that our policies, our decisions should be the best ones and totally aligned with the needs of the sector. Because, as you just mentioned, and that I agree with you, you need a stable and predictable environment in order to invest, in order to guarantee the best solutions possible. The life cycle of a vessel is 20 years for sure, but we already know now more 5%, less 5%, that we want to increase our, or reduce in this case, our greenhouse gases emissions. You already have more or less the target. It could be minus 5% or minus 10 or more 5 or more 10, but we know the path. And this is why it's so important for you to help, for you to help us in order to achieve the best concrete policies to guarantee that we are all aligned with this goal. For sure, globally we'll have huge challenges because the other third countries are not aligned with us, and we see that we only represent 7% of the total GHG emissions in the world, when we have the ambition of having like 90% of the total GHG. It's true, and we don't have on board these great powers that we have, worldwide power that we have right now. But this is why it's so important for us to continue to push and guarantee that our standards could be at the same time implemented in other third countries.
Thank you very much. High standards in the EU, but from policy you are working and you are asking stakeholders to work together to have coherence and to have predictability in the laws. But I would like to go further in these challenges and these barriers or these problems, let's call it in general, that the sector is facing. So, Mr. Hebrad, what are the main barriers when EU ambitious policies, goals meet the real-world implementation, if there are any?
We have a couple. One, as we just already referred to, is the availability of sufficient quantities of sustainable alternative fuels. Because if we innovate to develop new technologies, we need to be able to implement them on board, and the ships need to be able to sail with. So that's one part. I think the second part, and it was already touched upon, clarity and legal certainty. And that was also already touched upon. It's very important that if you invest in a technology today, you need to be able to sail with that technology for quite some time. And I think liquefied natural gas was one of the key examples. What is for us one of the most complicated things to break internally is the majority of the sector is small and medium-sized enterprises. How are we going to help them in that transition? I fully agree there are a couple of very good funding opportunities available. But if we, for example, look at the EU Innovation Fund, very happy with the fund, Maritime is in, but if I'm an SME, it's overly complex. So can we see in the context of the European Competitiveness Fund, how we could give the fund shape in such a way that pooling public and private resources also for SMEs makes sense? Because that is one of the things where we don't have a concrete solution yet. It's something we pick up internally in the coming couple of months, because it's easy to say, okay, it doesn't function at this moment in time. But then the second question is, how should it ideally function so that we can make use of the funding instruments available? But I think that are the three barriers I wrote down on top of everything else, of course, we already discussed this morning.
And then it has been talking about the role of innovation, digitalization that we have already spoken, and circularity. So what role can they realistically play in the transition? Mr.
The digitalization and this kind of elements. Okay, I think that it's digitalization and the development of IT and AI solutions and so on. It's very interesting and promising, but it's just a partial generator of solutions. I mean, you can increase the efficiency of a vessel because you have a better information. You know what's happening in the port, for example, that there is the wharf ready. This is something we are talking about in port call optimization and so on. No, you can advise the vessel because if the wharf is full, then you have not to go at the same speed. You can reduce the speed to arrive at the just-in-time moment in which all the services are prepared and so on. So you can reduce emissions in maybe 5%, 10%. Then there are other alternatives, no? Like you have seen, the use of wind propellers for helping the vessel and so on. That's another 5%, maybe 10%, no? So we are talking that with these additional measures, artificial intelligence for better management of the transit, complementary uses of technology and so on, you can increase the effectiveness or reduce the emissions and the consumption 10, 15, 20%, maybe 25%. But the big part of the cake is the alternative fuel. Always will be the alternative fuel. No? So here is the main problem, no? Because in order to provide an alternative fuel in a port, like could be in Barcelona, many things has to happen. Someone has to manufacture. I'm the port authority. I can facilitate things. I can put some land for someone to create an industry or put some depots for methanol, but I'm not the methanol provider. I'm not the methanol supplier. I need a barge to supply methanol. The barge costs 50 million euros, more or less, 40, 50. I will not invest in that barge because it's not my business as a port authority. So someone has to see the business, has to bring the barge, construct the barge. Sorry, a barge needs 4 or 5 years to be constructed. So if you don't have the barge now, you will need 5 years to be able to supply methanol in a port. Then you need the depots for the methanol. Someone has to bring the methanol here. There has to be a supply chain, completely new supply chain for doing these kind of things. And when you are finished with methanol, you have to start with ammonia. No? So at the end, you have a lot of things to do that implies a lot of partners. It's not just a decision of the port authority or a shipping line. Okay, I'm methanol ready. Where is the fuel? No, we have to create all the logistic for that fuel. And each field is different. Each field needs some additional issues or some additional regulations or some additional ordinances inside the port and so on. No? So to put all the elements in common and to get able to at last provide this new supply of fuel or so on, it's not easy at all. You will need years in each port. You will need developments in each port. You will need, let me to make a number, no? Each additional fuel in a port may be 100 to 100 million euros. Add for all the European ports and all for the different fuels. More or less. In OPS, onshore power supply, the Port of Barcelona will spend, and this is a number I can tell you, it's 200 million euros for connecting all the vessels, containers, cruises, ferries to the electrical grid. 200 million euros. We are talking about a methanol plant with a new barge and so on and on. That's 150 million euros to 100 million euros. So every time you are talking about, it seems that we are talking about, no, new fuel. No, no. Every time for each port, we're talking 100 to 100 million euros. Who will invest that? I can facilitate as a port authority, but I'm not the private business that I'm interested in that. Because the private business will say, okay, I put the investment, where are the vessels? And now we have some connections for on-power supply, onshore power supply, but not many vessels are prepared for connecting. Not many.
So the sector is not all parts of the sector in the same level.
No. And as he says, just a few container ships, big container ships from MSC or CMA or Maersk, but the grand majority of the vessels are not prepared for anything.
So
Cruises, yes, because I've seen that they are here, some sponsors. Cruises are probably the sector that is more focusing on innovation. They bid for the LNG years ago. Now they are bidding for methanol. So and they are going farther than the rest of the sector. Second sector is probably container ships and maybe ferries a little bit there, but the rest.
Mr. Hebrat, would you like to enter to answer this as well, to jump into this circularity, innovation, digitalization? Where are we?
You asked the
Where we
question
go?
before, are we able to achieve a competitive, resilient and sustainable future? Yeah, we published a document 2 weeks ago which had exactly that title. So if I would say no, I would basically say that document is void. So I cannot say no. But maybe I can say what we are looking at. So we are looking at research, development and innovation. We have this partnership currently with the Commission on Zero Emission. We are looking now at the next steps in the context of the next MFF. And we said, okay, we have the waterborne ecosystem. Let's call it ecosystem. We have identified 9 different roadmaps which we are going to develop. One is on the maritime manufacturing industry. Where can R&D help to regain competitiveness, resilience, and sustainability? Digitalization there will absolutely play a role. I hear different figures on the price differences when we would make use of the potential of digitalization, and that is around 30%, which would cross the price gap with some of our main competitors. The second part is ports, because if we build vessels, but the ports are not able to handle these vessels for one or the other reason, because of digital or zero emission technologies, all the other developments are stranded. And then we look into, if I may call them, 7 different product categories, if you look from the maritime manufacturing industry. One is inland navigation. There are 12,000 inland navigation vessels in Europe. And then we speak about an average age of 50 to 60 years, so there is really need for renewal or retrofitting. Second part is ferries, certainly because ferries are sailing on the European continent, can be European built, European equipped, and are key lifelines for some of the regions in Europe. Third part is short sea shipping. It might also, again, need different solutions for zero emissions. But again, they are also currently still built to a large extent in Europe. Cruise, as already mentioned, as one of the front runners in the innovation and where Europe has the lead. And then we look at offshore and intercontinental. But we added a 7th one, and that is blue economy. Now, blue economy has a very broad definition. So we said internally, what is for us blue economy? And that's linked to the industrial side. So one is fishing vessels, aquaculture vessels, all vessels which are not transport vessels. The second one is offshore infrastructure, like offshore wind platform technologies. And the third one is the underwater domain, like underwater unmanned vehicles. Also, yards and equipment manufacturers are leading there, but also it can counterbalance this cyclical shipbuilding nature, because you have 7 years of shipbuilding booms and then 7 years of far less shipbuilding orders. Now, on all of this, sustainability, including circularity and digital, are the key hooks. The only thing we agreed upon internally, digitalization is not the goal. Digitalization is an enabler for resilience, an enabler for lesser emissions, an enabler for competitiveness. But let's not see it as a goal. And there again, it depends on which of the segments of the ecosystem we are tackling. Certainly in terms of being able to work with lesser people, and on purpose, I don't speak about unmanned vessels because that's a completely different discussion, but sailing with lesser people, how can we use digitalization? Now, there we also see a confusion of digitalization versus automation and automation versus unmanned. So we all need to start speaking the same language there. But these are the 2 key hooks. Certainly where I think in terms of strategic autonomy, we can do a lot of things is in circularity. How can we scrap vessels in Europe and start to reuse the steel? We now see that in some regions, the steel is not being reused by the shipbuilding industry, but by other industries. So you still help the European circularity. So that's certainly something which requires a lot of attention in the coming period.
Thank you very much. After having an interesting discussion, I will open the floor to the audience. If someone would like to please. So we start this gentleman, and after that, the other. Please tell your name and your company or sector. Thank
François
you.
Golbery, ESAFON Switzerland. It's a family office network which work for the development of the blue economy. My question is, if we want to regain leadership in Europe, why not to put together a European blue economy investment bank that will solely look at blue economy issues, and in partnership with Nordic investment banks that are used to deal with maritime investment, and use blue bonds. Blue bonds are probably excellent to transitioning the blue economy, and the market is not there yet, but why not create a blue bond, a European blue bond market that will support the investment in the transitioning of the blue economy?
Thank you. Who would like to answer this question, please?
Yes,
Mr. Nasser.
very good question. Thanks a lot. So this is why we are always speaking about a single maritime fund in order to have all of that on this single fund. But at the same time, as we just referred, what is the definition of blue economy? It's so broad that this is why we go for competitiveness, horizon, we go for what we have like right now, innovation fund. So this is quite difficult to define. I believe that one of the first steps that we need as European Union to define is what we want for the blue economy. We want energy, we want reduce emissions, we want strategic autonomy. So we need first to define what we want. But the idea of having a single fund, I think, is a very good idea. I think the sector is asking, and we are totally supporting it. Unfortunately, the proposal for the Commission for the next MFF not going on that direction, but we'll do our best in order to at least ring-fence some money for the blue economy or for this sector. In order to guarantee that our competitiveness is not put at stake. As we just refer, there is very good solutions. I want to also highlight what was just said, and thank you for that. Very good solutions, very good possibilities, and but we need funding, private and public. The blue bonds, it's one thing that we all also heard from the agriculture sector, like the green bonds or the environmental sector. And I think it's going to be a very good resource when we exhausted all the European money. And that's important because, unfortunately, what we see is that we are not using the total capacity of the European funds. And as we are not using its total capacity, first, let's create the conditions to use it fully. And I totally agree what was said of the complexity of accession of the funds. And it's quite difficult for SME, for even individual beneficiaries. And we cannot have it anymore. We cannot create like a VIP club for companies that have direct access to the funds of the Commission and the others doesn't see anything. So this is quite important to democratize the access to funds and turn it into a more simple process. But indeed, what we are facing right now, it's a simplification process in order to have more accessible funds. And indeed, we need a broad, concrete definition in this case of what we want for the future of the blue economy.
Thank you very much. Over there, please. There was a question. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Paul from the Irish Maritime Development Office. I suppose given the sort of vital role that ports and shipping play in the whole European economy, as well as the sort of blue part, are there any lessons or transferable areas from other transport modes like aviation, as we heard earlier, that we could bring in to develop our waterborne industry?
Maybe from the Water Technology Platform, Waterborne, Mr. Havar, would like you to take this question?
Good morning, Paul. I certainly think there are similarities and we can learn from each other, but we also we are not fully similar sectors. As was discussed this morning, if you look at the buying power of the aviation companies, you cannot compare this with the buying power of the majority of the maritime sector. But we can certainly look at solutions which can be transferred from one sector to the other. We are also exploring what has been done in airports and what could potentially be of interest to ports and maybe the other way around, because there are, in that sense, similarities, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Any other question from the public? Yes, please.
I also want to add one small thing, because what we are seeing in the aviation sector is in some cases are the people that travel that are paying these changes. And it's very, very important that in this case of the maritime sector, it's not the people, the consumers that will pay all of these transformations. I know that it's quite difficult, the volume of financing that is needed to come only from the public sector, private money has to be mobilized for sure, and they have to be paid. But at the same time, we need, as European Union, and of course as policy makers, we cannot to not create even more problems to our competitiveness, increasing the prices because of the need of innovation of the sector. So we need to guarantee all the funding possible and all the solutions possible in order to avoid that the final stage of the price-making destination will affect the consumers.
Thank you very much. So, more comments or any other question? So I would like to thank you all for coming and to get a few what we have here for concluding that it's very important to have certainty and coherence, ambition, roadmap into policy to be able to advance. Also, that is difficult to combine sustainability with resilient, but on the other hand, they have to be hand in hand. There is not other way. So we need to work policy and stakeholders to work together because there is not other way. Though at the moment, as an example that Carles Rua presented with the famous apagón, switch off or blackout in Spain, prove that it's difficult being sustainable and resilient, but it's the only way to go. Also, we mentioned sometimes a lack of communication, because what is the waterborne sector is perceived as sometimes only for cargo, but there are much other business which take more part of the sector, and most of the ships are small and medium enterprise owners. So how do we finance that? What help are they going to have? Because the investment is really high. Sorry. So it's about technology, yes, but especially about implementation as well. We also hear about how important is the sovereignty of strategic sovereignty for Europe in terms of defense, security. We also heard as well that digitalization is key, but it's an enabler to circularity, to sustainability, not an end, a goal on its own, but an enabler. And then also that is a problem, or well, it's a challenge, the alternative for fuels. We need to have alternative fuels and to have the infrastructure. We heard that infrastructure is very important, and who's going to pay for that? Who in the change value is going to pay for that? So I would like to say now thank you very much to all of you for participating, especially for the speakers. It was a really interesting debate where I think we all took quite important notes. For me, it has been really enriching. And we are now going for heading for lunch. But first, Ralph, please, if you can have a word. Thank you very much. Thank you.